Hi, and welcome back to Chess for Sleep. In our last game, we took a look at Fabiano's win over Anish Giri in the 2012 Vikings A tournament. Fabiano had a great tactical find in that game where he traded a piece for 3 pawns and was able to just totally steamroll Anish. So today we're going to continue our candidates preview series, and we're going to take a look at a game from Hikaru Nakamura. It was Hikaru with the black pieces versus Boris Gelfand with the white pieces in the 2010 World Team Championship. And if you saw Hikaru's appearance on the Lex Friedman podcast, when Lex asked Hikaru, what's your immortal game? Hikaru had a couple of games in mind, but the one, he mentioned this one against Boris Gelfand. And yeah, we'll see why it's so memorable for Hikaru. Hikaru did kind of went through this game a little bit in that podcast. I would definitely encourage you to have a look at his appearance on that podcast. It was an interesting interview overall. So let's go ahead and dig into this game. So Boris plays d4, Hikaru responds knight f6. After c4, we get g6 from Hikaru, and Hikaru is going for a King's Indian. So, I'm actually going to take a look at this from White's perspective here, and just talk a little bit about this King's Indian opening. So, let's put a couple more moves on the board. This is what we see in the game. Knight c3, standard stuff. Bishop g7, e4, d6 from black, and now Boris plays knight f3. So at this point, this isn't a guarantee we're getting a main line. We could get castles and then h3 from white, and we'd be going into, I think it would be a Makagana variation with h3, but with knight f3 played as well. But here, Hikaru castles, and now bishop e2 from Boris, and we're getting a mainline King's Indian. So, a lot of chess teachers say, with a lot of openings, you want to learn the main line first, and then, if you want to learn some sidelines after that, go for it. I really do not like the mainline King's Indian for white simply because it really gives black what black wants. Why do black players of black, why do they play the King's Indian as opposed to, the Slav or Queen's Gambit declined, or, there's so many options for black. Why do they play the King's Indian? And of course it's because they want to get a kingside attack. And when you play the main line of the King's Indian, you're basically saying, I'm going to give black an attack on the king side, but I'm going to win on the queen side, and we're going to get into this race. And there's just a lot of other options for white that avoid giving black what he's looking for. If we take it back, a line I like to play is just g3 here, and you're committing to the fianchetto. Black can go for a Grunfeld with d5, but this fianchetto line is pretty good against that too. But again, with the fianchetto, black's not getting a kingside, a dominating kingside attack. In fact, it would be bad for black in most of these lines to go for such an attack. So again, you're kind of thwarting white is thwarting black's entire goal with choosing the King's Indian by playing something like the fianchetto. Other good options for white coming back. You could, again, the Makaganov, h3, controlling g4, and here white is actually eventually going to play g4. White might be getting his own attack on the king side. Similar ideas in the same-ish, controlling g4 right away, no pin from this bishop, and here, eventually this knight's going to develop like this, and this pawn is eventually going to come up the board. support an e5 push. So a lot of options for white that I think are more appealing. Now you can also get the Averbach, and again you get this pin going right away, threatening this pin if black goes e5. So you might get kicked with h6, but there are just some interesting options, a lot of interesting options for white, and I think the main line, again, is the most kind of complicit one. It's the most kind of conciliatory to black. Black can just go into the reason why the black chose the King's Indian. It's to get a variation like the main line. So, if I had a student asking me what to play against black in the King's Indian, I probably wouldn't be to, if he really wanted, if he or she wanted to play the main line, I certainly wouldn't discourage it. But I think there are just so many better options, especially these days. I mean, there's a reason that all these sidelines are so popular. But regardless, Boris, we get this main line, and we'll go back to Hikaru's perspective. So we get a main line, and here, by far the most popular move is e5, and we get it. Castles from white, again, by far the most common move. Knight c6, threatening to eventually take here. If white just does nothing, white just plays d5 here. And knight e7 from Hikaru. And now we have a little bit of a parting of the ways for white. So the most common move for white here is simply b4. And again, the idea with this opening for white, black's going to get kingside attack. Excuse me. And white is going to gain space on the queen side and eventually break through on the queen side. So b4 is simply white. White is looking to win this race versus black. Black wants to mate white on the king side before white can crash through on the king side. On the queen side. And the reality, white is essentially going to be winning the game on the queen side. And so black essentially has to mate white on the king side, because if not, white is just totally winning on the queen side, and this game is going to be over. So black has to succeed with this king side attack. So it's really a do or die situation for black on the king side. So b4 is the start of white's queenside play here. It's not what Boris chose. The other two most common moves. So knight e1 is a move that, again, it clears the way for this pawn to come up the board. And the idea here, playing f3 to secure this pawn chain, and you make a hole for this bishop to come to e3 and then to f2. And from there, this bishop can play an important defensive role over here on the king side. So, knight e1 makes sense. Here, we get knight d2 for Boris. The downside of this move is, well, you're blocking in this bishop. And this bishop, again, wanted to come on this diagonal and be a defensive piece for white. Here, you're blocking in the bishop, so this maneuver can't happen as quickly. This maneuver. But the good news is this knight wants to come to c4. This would be an excellent square for this knight. And so by pivoting here, the knight is coming to c4. Once he gets to c4, also, you're unleashing this bishop. So that's the idea then. So Boris goes with knight d2. And now knight e8 from Hikaru. So here, the most common move is a5. And simply, you're stopping this b4 move. White didn't play b4. White played knight d2. So now a4 is inconveniencing white. White can still get in b4, but we're going to see something like 8-3. Now the knight clears the way. And now bishop e1, because of course you have to play this first because you play b4 right away and this rook's hanging. So knight d7 and rook b1 first, supporting this b pawn thrust. So a5, very common move here. But that's not what Hikaru did. Hikaru goes knight e8. And the idea here is simply, again, it's embracing this do or die race. You know, you can have b4. I'm simply playing f5 and I'm getting started on my own kingside attack. So as mentioned, b4 from white. Black didn't play a5. It's just inviting this b4 thrust. So now white, you know, got to move his knight, and he's getting b4 in for free. So it's committal by black. Black is absolutely all in now on this kingside attack. And that's what we see. We see f5 from black. And now c5 from white. So again, we see this race. These pawns are racing up the board. These pawns are racing up the board. And now knight f6 from black, no longer blocking in this pawn. This knight looks to be part of the attack that's coming up. Also, of course, pressurizing white's center. So now f3 from white, again as mentioned, securing this pawn chain. And now once this, this knight can go c4, and this bishop can now get into its defensive position. But we see f4 from black. And of course this has aggressive intentions on the king, but again it's also controlling e3, and now this bishop's route is taken away. So if this bishop wants to get over the king side to defend, it's going to need to somehow get over here and pivot back over to the king side. And now knight c4 from white. Again, that was the destination of this knight the whole time. And we see that, after a capture here on d6, that this square can be very weak. This, of course, is the perpetual weakness in the King's Indian. And the idea here is simply that white's counterplay against this weak pawn is going to make it difficult for black to get an attack in. And it's even more emphasizing that, if black isn't careful, tries an attack that doesn't pan out, then this center is crumbling. The queen side is obviously crumbling. White is just suffocating black on the queen side. So we see that now. We see this pressure on the center means black is going to need some nifty maneuvering with this king side attack to win before white is just crashing through. g5 from black. g4 is coming. h5 g4 is the simple idea here. Black is just throwing his pawns down the board. And now a4 from white. The race is on. It's just, who's going to crash through first? That is the question here. So now knight g6 from black. So we see here the knight moving off this diagonal. Maybe it's freeing up this queen to maybe come in on this diagonal eventually. After this pawn moves, maybe this knight can go somewhere and then the queen is coming in. Also, we see that maybe the knight wants to come in on h4, where he's pressurizing these two pawns. At the same time, we see that, again, white is quick on the queen side. So here, is this actually going to be fast enough for black? Because these knights are also potentially in the way for the queen to maybe, come in on these diagonals. So, what use would it be if the knight, for instance, sat here, with these pawns? It's the king by himself, but again, maybe this bishop is coming to defend. So how does a knight on the square actually threaten white at all? It's something to start thinking about. So now bishop a3 from white, and again, with this diagonal, white's unable to come to e3. Well, maybe this bishop can come to a3 and, find a way to pivot back over to the king side to help out the defense. Also, again, we're piling up. We can unveil an attack whenever we want on this d6 pawn, and again, that's really black's biggest liability in the position. So now rook f7 from black. So, adding some defense to the second rank. Also, importantly, this rook can now potentially come to g7 and be ready to fire down this g file and prepare in the attack. So b5 from white, as mentioned, and this bishop. So of course eyeing up d6. So black has to respond to this now. So there's really two ways to do that. You can either take, or bishop coming back to add support. So if we played here, let's say white takes here. So we're kind of, if this is white here, once black goes for this, so now black is always tied down to this weakness. At the same time, white's not breaking through. That there's not going to be this final death blow for white on the queen side either. Black can potentially block this up. So if we get b6 from white here, we get a6. And black is suffocating, but black is still getting these pawns up the board. Ultimately, white now is going to really have to be careful about defending his king because white isn't actually crashing through here. So those are the issues with taking on d6. But none of that matters here in the game because Hikaru actually goes ahead and takes. And the good news about this, well, first the issue is you're sending, this bishop gets to capture. And as we mentioned, the bishop is now on the diagonal that it wanted to be on. This bishop is now able to come and play a defensive role. So that's the downside of this move. The upside of this move is that these three pawns were sitting here looming, and now we're breaking them up. So, we're slowing down white's ability to crash through here. Also, we're simply trading off what would have been this weakness sitting here on d6. That's not to say that the square isn't an issue. White can play d6 now, and again be crashing through quite quickly. But again, Hikaru has a way to accelerate his attack on the king, as we're going to see, and it makes, he's buying himself a little bit of time here, though. Alright, so Boris simply recaptures, and now Hikaru gets on with his attack. And again, the race is still on. We see this tension resolved, but it is still a race. These pawns are coming up the board. White's pawns are coming down the board. And so we see a5. We see a5, and now white has these two threats. And black is threatening g4. So, who wins this race? I mean, again, these knights are sitting here. They'd have to get out of the way for the queen to get in. These pawns, it's not like g5 is just the end for white. But again, we're already getting b6 and d6. So it would be understandable, I think, to look at this position and really say white just won the race. This is over for black because white's crashing through first. But the good news for black is that black's attack is on the king for white. White is crashing through, but maybe you attack this queen, but it's not the same as attacking this king. So keep that in mind here. So now g4 for white, g4 for black. And the threat here with this pawn, so let's quickly take a look here. Let's say white continues with b6. What if black takes here? And we'll quickly see that this would not be very good for black. Simply recapturing with the bishop, and you might be saying, well, this rook coming in, attacking the white king. So let's try that. Bishop f8, again, clearing the way for this rook. The bishop was under attack, so we traded off. Here, you have to hold this e-pawn. So again, just because we traded off d6, we got rid of one weakness, but we have this e5 weakness. You'd like to play this knight here, and you would love if this knight didn't capture. You'd love to see this knight retreat or something, but that's not happening. This pawn is falling. So if you play queen takes, king h1, and white is just surviving this. Black's attack is not quick enough. Black's not totally getting off the board here, but this is, again, one of those situations where black's king side attack has not succeeded, and white is better on the queen side. So white is just solidly better in this position. Maybe not outright winning yet, but white has a nice edge now. So taking is not what you want. What black is aiming for here is actually g3, and we'll go ahead and get in white's move here, and then we'll take a look at why g3 is so strong. So b6 from white. Again, this is white is crashing through here, and white would love to see black respond to this threat, take time to respond to this threat. But again, it's been a race this whole time. Black still has to try and win this race. Black is trying to mate this white king. So you might, again, you see white here on b6, and you might think, well, what if we take here? And the problem is here, a6. So now, maybe think now, well, we've locked this down, and now we can just focus on this king. Well, here, there's multiple ways to go for white. White can actually just do this, defend here. And black, now g3, and the attack isn't quick enough. You move the king, bishop f8, d6, d6 for white, and this pawn is all of a sudden looking very dangerous. There were other ways for white to go as well. e1 immediately. Now the queen is getting in the game. And again, you have all these pieces lined up just to do dangerous things on the queen side. There's always the possibility of a sack at some point and getting b7 in. So yeah, but again, it's tempting to not just let white push b6 and to just leave this tension. But that's what you have to do here. And it's what Hikaru does. The move here is g3. So why is g3 so strong? Excuse me. Well, again, maybe as white, maybe you think you're going to defend this by playing h3. And you might be thinking, well, I've locked this position down. These pawns are all locked, so white is safe. And we're winning on the queen side. Great. This is 1-0. Well, the thing is you have this sack. This sack, and you can't take this, because if you take this, you immediately get queen c8. And there's no way for white to, you've got this immediate threat of black coming in to mate. The engine actually just wants to give up the rook, which is obviously totally gone. But here, what else can you do as white? If you try and clear the rook out, you're not getting out of this. You're still getting mated. Just as an example. Yeah, because the king can't move here. And g2 check. And there you go. So yeah, so this is a huge threat, and you're also, let's say you try and give up the rook here. You can actually play this. Now you're threatening here, and you're threatening here. Yeah. So it's totally lost if white plays this h3 move because of this sacrifice. And again, you might think, well, let's take here. Well, it's the same issue. You're threatening this mate, and there's no way for white to deal with it. This king is just stuck here. You might think, well, I'm going to run with the king, and here, You can go ahead and take first. It's brutal. Computer wants to go d6, but it's not good enough because you can just move. The thing is, you're moving this knight. You're attacking the bishop. This bishop just has to give himself up because this is too strong. It's the only move. So, yeah. So you really, in these type of King's Indian positions, you have to be extremely careful with moving this pawn in this situation. Here's death, and taking here is also death. But there are times where moving this pawn is a key defensive resort for white. It's just not here because black is coming in with this bishop and this queen too aggressively. So what do you here? What do you play as white here? Maybe take a couple of seconds. What's the best defensive move for white here? Okay. The best move here is King H1. King H1, and now let's say Knight D7, and you're attacking, and you're threatening to bring the queen in. Well, here, there's a couple moves for white. You can go ahead and take here. If you bring the queen in, it's just bishop G1. And now, if you take, well, you're not taking here, even though this is okay, but it's not as good as the game. The best move here is just bishop here. And now black has no attack whatsoever. And now white just gets d6 in, and these pawns are a huge problem, and you are just not getting to white's king. So, it's so often in these attacking positions that your pawn, you've gotten aggressive with this pawn, but then, when you take at the right time, this pawn now all of a sudden is blocking. It's actually a defensive piece for this king. So, yeah, really interesting. The defensive resources for white here. Okay, so bringing this back. Again, best move for white here is King H1, and Boris does play it. So, now, black, again, we would eventually like to clear out this G file and be threatening to bring in the rook on this G file. So here we get bishop F8, and bishop F8, it's adding support to this weak D6 square, but it's also not preventing it, and it's what we get here. We get D6. White also could have retreated this bishop to G1, and that would have been okay for white too, because again, this bishop wants to be ready to come to F2 to harass the queen. But here D6 is a good move from white, because again, we're threatening to take here, threatening to just have these pawns sitting here, and that's going to be too much for black if black isn't mating white. So black takes, and now bishop G1. And so white is okay here. The computer gives white just a little bit of an edge. So why retreating here? Why not taking here? If you take here, you get this. Now C takes D6. See, and now bishop retreats. G takes H2. Again, you move the bishop out of the way. And H4. And again, you've dissolved this central pressure for black. You no longer have this counterplay coming in, but you still have the ability to get at this king. So this is strongly better for black. So, yeah. So here, A takes, you just back off. And here, different options to go for black. If you just take like this, D takes C7, if queen takes C7, knight B5, and all of a sudden, this queen is deflected away from this diagonal. We're no longer just getting at the king. We're actually, we've discoordinated black's position, and white is threatening to come into the position now. So if queen c6 here, knight c to d6, and again, all of a sudden we're threatening the rook. There's potential for forks here. If rook d7, queen b3 check, getting out of this pin, king h7, rook f to c1, and we can see that black now has no time to come mate this king, and even though white's down 2 pawns here, but black's position is totally uncoordinated now, and white is gaining time. So here white is doing much better. These knights are going to be incredibly dangerous. I mean, this knight can come here. Black could get mated here if black isn't careful with these rooks coming in, this queen coming in. So, coming back again. So white makes this retreating move. Boris plays bishop g1. Again, knowing that if black wastes time here and takes this pawn, anyway, it's going to be too much. Black's not going to be able to withstand that attack. So we now get knight h4 from Hikaru. This is a key move. So what's the deal with this move? This looks like a strange move. Again, white, we saw how quickly white's position can activate on the king side. So if black's making a move on the queen side, surely it should have something to do with this black queen coming to threaten mate. But again, we saw that this pawn, what is it good for now except to take here? And again, the bishop, not in this position, but if when that type of move happens, this pawn just takes, this bishop is coming out and defending the square from the queen. So how do you attack? And Hikaru finds this move. Here we go. Hikaru finds this move, knight h4. And what is he threatening? This is defended by the king. This is obviously defended. So what is this knight doing? What is the threat here? It's really not immediately clear. It's not an easy move to find. Well, white's best move here, and really there's a couple moves for white. So white can't just go rook e1, and you're bringing this bishop in to potentially help and defend on the king side. But this move, this is another defensive move for white, and this would have been very hard this is just so counterintuitive. It's hard to play. But you actually have h takes g3. And we saw how dangerous it is to move this piece for white. But look here, f takes g3, and now we're just, okay, so black just needs to get to the square. So how does he do it? Well, let's say, it's white's move. So bishop e3, hitting these dark squares. So let's say the king just drops back, and we're defending here, right? Now we just need a knight move, and this queen is coming in and mating, right? Well, we get queen d7, we get d takes c7. And now, so this queen is getting inconvenienced, so the queen doesn't want to come here and get deflected from this diagonal, and of course can't trade off. So let's say bishop or queen e7. Well, now this is a nice move, queen d8, and now you're really getting deflected from this diagonal. Computer says this, and this is over for black. This is over for black now. Yeah, obviously the race is over. A takes b6, takes. And look at this position, equal on material, but it's just not coordinated. This position is not coordinated. This rook is coming in, these knights are coming in, this knight's coming into b5. Yeah, just like that, this position has crumbled for black. Always having to take care of this weakness. This is a very, very bad position for black. So, yeah, here we go. this resource is all of a sudden there, and it's purely because this queen has no way to get to the square. So you always have to be careful moving, the h-pawn in this type of position, but here it actually is valid, although very hard to find. But it's not what Boris played. Boris played rook e1, which again is a fine move here. The computer says it's we're still slightly better for white. Again, just with the idea that this bishop can come back. You're opening up a square for the king as well. So it's a logical move. So what did Hikaru play here? What do you play for Hikaru here? Again, you have this pawn. This pawn's threatening to come here and deflect the queen. So how do you avoid that? Is there a move that avoids that? Again, the threat is this. The threat is this. And yeah, this you're never getting here is the problem. So how do you deal with it? How do you deal with this? Also, just a note, if the rook takes, then you're trading or actually the queen is just hanging if you try to take with the rook. So again, this is threatening. The queen has to deal with the fact that it's attacked, and if you go here, again, you're not on this diagonal. So what could black play in this position after rook e1? Well, here Hikaru played the brilliant move knight takes g2. Knight takes g2. What is going on with this move? What is going on with this move? Well, what's going on with this move is that we're threatening the rook, right? We're just threatening to take this rook right now. And, well, if white takes, the immediate threat from black is now we're lined up. Again, this rook came to f7 for a reason. And this position, you're losing here, but you're getting this, and this is going to be hard for white to hold. It is holding, but all the attacking chances are for black. It's basically whether black can, and there, potential for perpetuals. It's basically black's game to win with the attack or draw, get a perpetual now. So that's not what white wants at all. So it makes sense that Boris went instead with the idea that, he's not winning this game if he takes. He plays d takes c7. So again, we're threatening to win the queen. We can't take with the rook. If we take with the queen, again, we're coming off this diagonal, and surely, the sacrifice is going to be, it's going to be demonstrated as unsound. So, at this point, I think Boris is thinking that Hikaru overstepped this position. Because what can black do here if not taking? You're going to lose your queen. So what did Hikaru play in this position? Well, here we see the beginning of the sequence that made this game live in infamy in the mind of Boris Gelfand, that's for sure, and his fans, and made it an immortal game for Hikaru. Hikaru plays knight takes e1, knight takes e1. So, easy to see why this is missed. Of course, the obvious move here is simply queening. We have two queens on the board. This is great for white. Well, this is what we call a mate in one. A really nice mate. Just the knight and the pawn. We wondered, what could this knight do by itself? And what could this pawn do up here on g3? Well, together they're actually mating. Didn't see that coming. So, knight takes e8, and this queen is immune. This queen cannot be taken. So, because this knight has now taken this rook, and this queen is immune, black is just totally winning. It's totally winning. well, yeah, what do you do here? So Boris here, recaptures, and this could have been the end of the fireworks. This could have been the end of the fireworks. Black's queen could have simply taken on c7 and been out of danger, but as you just saw, what we got instead was g2 check. So this queen is hanging, but to be fair, g2, it's a check, so takes. And now this queen is still hanging, but we see we have another very sensible check. I think this is a check that a lot of us would play, and Hikaru plays it, so we're lining up the king here. So now rook h1. So, we still see this pawn is alive. Maybe if black miscalculates this attack, maybe white, can eventually take here. This pawn can live. These knights can come in. Again, we're threatening here. So is this totally over for black? Or sorry, is this totally over for white just because he lost his pawn, he lost the exchange? It's actually equal on pawns. Maybe we win a pawn down the exchange. We got the bishop pair though. Maybe we get a counterattack on black. Well, now we see that we really have a special sequence here, because this queen is hanging and we don't have a check. We don't have a check. So surely this queen has to do something now. Take here, or I don't know, move here. Just has to get to safety. Maybe here. We get bishop h3. Bishop h3. So just the simple threat is, again, before we were mating with this pawn, well, this bishop is just now threatening to take the place of that pawn and mate this king. So this queen is still immune from this pawn somehow. So bishop f1, the only sensible way to stop this mate. And now this is the move, I think. I think when Hikaru made this move, he knew that this game was going to be long remembered and long celebrated for him. So this, again, we're under threat from this pawn. We're under threat from this pawn. What did Hikaru do here? Well, sadly, this queen does not remain under threat from this pawn for another move. Instead, it's under threat from the bishop with queen d3, and if you take here, well, that bishop had a job to do, and that's checkmate. So this queen is still hanging, and I know when Hikaru played this and saw that his queen was just still hanging for another move, I guarantee you that he was thinking that this game is going to be celebrated as one of his all-time greats. So now we're attacking here, so just here and checkmating. So white does have a defensive resource to hold this pawn, and we're defending this knight. So this pawn finally falls. White does take on e5. So you wonder here, if black isn't checkmating, again, with this pawn gone and these pawns coming, and maybe white gets over to these diagonals and gets counterplay on the king. Well, there's just no time for white, and again, white is just losing more material because bishop takes f1, and again, this queen is hanging. Just one more move, this queen is hanging, and if you take, the bishop just comes back and mates. So it's queen takes f1, and now winning on c3. So with that, white has staved off mate, but black has just now won too much material. Here, white could defend the knight, white could go here. It's not doing enough. Now the queen can finally come back, take this c7 pawn for good measure, and black is totally winning. If you take here, you can actually just take here because this queen's under attack. So, but here we actually get rook c1 from Boris, And, this knight comes off the board. What this was threatening, white now can play c1 or c8, queening. So, but through all those those trades, again, black is just up a piece in this position. And after black captures on a5, black is just going to have these outside connected passers. So here, the queen goes ahead and protects this diagonal for the queen while also hitting the rook. And we get queen c4. Oh, I'm sorry. We don't get queen c4. We get rook d8, just defending. Queen c4 is the computer's recommendation, but obviously trading queens is just resigning for white. So white tries just to keep pieces on, but now the last move of the game is just b takes a5. And with b takes a5, obviously these pawns are eventually gonna get up the board and queen. Black's up a piece, and obviously black is never getting mated. If anything, white might still get mated. It would just take, if white tries anything to get counterplay on these pawns, white is going to get mated. So that is the game. How about that sequence, huh? Going back. Yeah, what a move. Taking here, I mean, sure, a lot of us play moves like this. They're called speculative sacrifices. But yeah, first this. Seeing this mate was tough. Obviously, it's something that Boris missed. Sorry. Yeah, G2. Yeah, and then just to leave your queen hanging for so many moves. I mean, that's why Hikaru considers it such a strong game. And again, one more time, to just keep it hanging, because you were just crushing white. You were just coming in. It's such a cool game for Hikaru. Well deserves its place as one of his all-time great games. So, yeah, that does it for our analysis on Hikaru. We'll be covering the other candidates in upcoming videos. We might do another Hikaru game. As mentioned, he mentioned another game of his that is could also be warranting of that Immortal title, so we might be taking a look at another one as well. So yeah, until the next video, I really appreciate you watching. In the meantime, be well, and I'll see you guys in the next one.